The city was quiet that morning, wrapped in soft fog that blurred the edges of the streets. Claire Dawson sat by her apartment window, holding her coffee mug tightly as she watched the mist move over Portland. The world outside felt far away, almost peaceful, but inside her, thoughts moved faster than she could quiet them. She was 34, steady and responsible, with a good job in marketing, a small circle of friends, and a routine that rarely changed. Yet, lately, every morning began with the same thought. Him, Daniel Hayes. He wasn't supposed to mean as much as he did. He was just a coworker, someone she saw every weekday at the office, someone she exchanged polite smiles with in meetings, and someone who had a way of turning the dullest day into something brighter. Daniel was easy to be around. He had that quiet kind of warmth that made people trust him, listen to him. He never tried too hard. And maybe that's why people noticed him without him ever noticing them. Claire had worked with Daniel for 2 years, and during that time they'd become friends. Not close friends, just the kind where conversations flowed easily, where you laughed about work over coffee and texted about deadlines late at night. But somewhere along the way, something changed. She began looking forward to those messages more than she wanted to admit. It wasn't a sudden thing. Love rarely was. It came softly over time. In the way she'd catch herself watching him talk during meetings, or how her heart lifted when his name appeared in her inbox. And yet she told herself it was nothing. Just admiration, respect, friendship, until that Tuesday night. It was late, almost 9 p.m. The rest of their team had left after a long day working on a campaign proposal, but Claire stayed behind to finish up. She liked the quiet of the empty office, the hum of the city lights outside. When she looked up from her screen, she saw Daniel standing by the door, jacket slung over his shoulder, smiling. "You're still here?" he asked. She smiled back. "I could ask you the same," he laughed. "Fair point. I was heading out and noticed the lights still on. You shouldn't walk home this late." She waved him off, pretending not to feel her heart skip. "It's fine. I live a few blocks away." "I'll walk you," he said simply. There was no hesitation in his voice, just quiet care. And though part of her wanted to protest, to say no, "I'll be fine," she couldn't, because she wanted to say yes, desperately. So, she just nodded. Outside, the air was cool, the streets damp from earlier rain. They walked side by side through the quiet city. The sidewalks glistened under streetlights, and the faint smell of coffee drifted from a nearby cafe. They talked about everything, their favorite movies, travel dreams, even silly office gossip. It was easy, natural. Claire couldn't remember the last time she'd felt that kind of calm around someone. When they reached her apartment building, they stopped under the awning. She turned to him, unsure what to say. It wasn't a date, not really, but it also wasn't just 2 coworkers saying goodnight. "Thanks for walking me," she said softly. Daniel smiled. That small, unguarded kind of smile that made his eyes crease slightly. "Anytime." He started to turn away, then hesitated. "You know, Claire, I like talking to you. You make work a little less boring?" She finished for him, grinning. "Something like that," he said, laughing. "See you tomorrow?" She nodded, her voice quiet. "Yeah, tomorrow." And just like that, he was gone. Claire stood at her door long after he left, heart pounding in a way she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to run after him, to say, "You make work better for me too," but the words caught in her throat. Because if she said it, it would mean admitting something she wasn't ready to face, that she was falling for someone who didn't even know. She spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled in everything unsaid. The next morning, she tried to act normal. She told herself it was nothing, just a kind gesture from a good friend. But when she saw him at work, leaning over her desk to ask about the project, her chest tightened again. Every time their eyes met, every time he smiled that familiar smile, she felt herself slipping a little further. Still, she said nothing. Weeks passed, and their friendship continued. Coffee runs, inside jokes, late-night brainstorming sessions. It was easy to pretend it was enough, but deep down she knew she was walking a fine line. She could feel the weight of everything she wasn't saying, pressing harder every day. Then came the office dinner, the night that could have changed everything. They had just wrapped up a big campaign, and their manager invited everyone to celebrate. The restaurant was warm, filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Daniel sat across from her, relaxed and smiling, his sleeves rolled up, his laughter filling the air. At one point, he leaned in and said quietly, "You did great on this project. Claire, seriously, I don't think we'd have pulled it off without you." Her heart fluttered. It was the perfect moment, the kind that happens once, and if you miss it, it's gone. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something honest, maybe even brave. But then someone called Daniel's name, breaking the moment. He turned away, and she let the words die in her throat again. Later that night, when everyone was leaving, Daniel offered her a ride home. She almost said yes, almost. But fear whispered, "Don't make it weird. Don't ruin what you have." So instead, she smiled politely. "Thanks, but I'll walk." He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. "All right then. Good night, Claire." Good night. And that was it. The first time she realized she might have let something beautiful slip away. When she got home, she sat by the window again, staring out at the city lights. The world looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but she felt different, heavier somehow. Because for the first time, Claire understood what it meant to want something you were too afraid to reach for. She wasn't sure what would happen next, or if anything would. But as she lay in bed that night, one thought echoed in her mind. That was the first time I almost ruined everything. And he didn't even know. 2 weeks passed since that night. Yet Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something between her and Daniel had changed. He still smiled the same way, still stopped by her desk every morning with his coffee in hand, but there was something different now, a small distance she couldn't explain. Maybe it was her own imagination, or maybe it was guilt. Either way, every time he spoke, she felt the quiet reminder of what she hadn't said. One Friday afternoon, as the office buzzed with weekend excitement, Daniel stopped by her desk again. "Hey, a few of us are getting together at my place tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just food, board games, maybe a movie. You should come." He said it casually, like it was nothing. But her heart picked up instantly. It had been months since anyone invited her out like that, and the thought of spending time with him outside of work filled her with both joy and panic. She forced a smile. "Yeah, that sounds fun." "Great," he said, grinning. "Starts around 7. Bring dessert if you want bonus points," she laughed. Noted. The next day, Claire spent all morning convincing herself to go. She cleaned her apartment, picked out an outfit, even baked a tray of brownies. By late afternoon, she was standing in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked fine. Simple jeans, soft sweater, nothing too much. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning. What if I say something stupid? What if everyone notices how I look at him? What if I make things awkward? She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, scrolling through their old text messages, short, friendly, harmless. But between those lines were moments that meant more to her than they should have. Her chest tightened as the fear crept in again. Finally, she typed out a message. "Hey, something came up. I don't think I can make it tonight. Sorry." Her thumb hovered for a long moment before she pressed send. A minute later, his reply came. "No worries. Maybe next time." It was polite, simple, and it broke her heart. That evening, while everyone else laughed at Daniel's apartment, Claire sat alone on her couch, eating one of the brownies she'd made for the party. She told herself it was fine, that she wasn't missing anything. But when she saw a photo pop up on social media, Daniel smiling, surrounded by friends, something inside her ached. He looked happy, and she couldn't help wondering if he even noticed she wasn't there. The following Monday, work felt colder somehow. Daniel greeted her kindly, but the warmth between them seemed dimmed. She caught him glancing at her once or twice, as if trying to read her. She smiled and pretended nothing was wrong. But deep down, she knew that her silence had built a wall neither of them knew how to cross. Days turned into weeks. Their friendship fell into a rhythm again, but the easy flow was gone. Everything felt a little too polite, a little too careful. Every time she thought of saying something, "I'm sorry I didn't come. I wanted to. I just got scared." The words stuck in her throat. Then one evening, as they wrapped up a late project, Daniel looked at her and said, "Hey, you've been kind of distant lately. Everything okay?" The question caught her off guard. She forced a small laugh. "Yeah, of course. Just a lot on my mind." He nodded, not pressing further. "If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me." That night, his kindness made her ache even more. Because she did want to talk. She wanted to tell him everything. How she missed the way things used to be. How she was the one who'd broken their easy friendship without meaning to. But instead, she just said, "Thanks," and went back to typing. The next day, their team got new project assignments. Daniel was paired with another coworker, Emily, a bright and cheerful designer who seemed to bring laughter wherever she went. Claire tried to tell herself it didn't matter, but watching them work side by side was harder than she expected. They clicked easily, laughing at the smallest things, finishing each other's sentences. One afternoon, she walked past the conference room and heard Emily say, "You're really easy to talk to, Daniel. I see why everyone likes you." He chuckled. "You're not so bad yourself." It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. That night, Claire stayed late at the office again. The building was empty, and the only sound was the soft hum of the printer. She sat at her desk staring at her computer screen, but her mind was far away, back to that missed night at Daniel's apartment. If she'd gone, maybe things would be different. Maybe she wouldn't feel like she was losing something she never even had. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Daniel. "Still at work? Don't tell me you're pulling another late one." She hesitated before replying. "Just finishing up a few things. You already home. You really should take a break sometimes." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my mother." "Good. Maybe you'll listen to me then," he replied, adding a small laughing emoji. The message was simple, but it made her feel lighter. For a moment it felt like they were back to how things used to be. Easy and familiar. But as soon as the moment passed, the guilt returned. She had built this distance herself. She had turned something genuine into something complicated. A few days later, she overheard someone mention that Daniel and Emily were grabbing lunch together. It was just lunch, nothing unusual, but the thought made her chest tighten again. Not jealousy exactly, but the sharp sting of regret. That evening she sat by her window again, the city lights flickering below. The same question circled in her mind. Why am I like this? Why do I keep running from what I want? Her thoughts went back to Daniel's words. "You've been kind of distant lately." He had noticed. He cared. That alone should have been enough to make her open up. But fear had a way of silencing her, of making her believe that protecting her heart was safer than risking it. She thought about texting him, just to say hi. Just to start again. But before she could, another photo appeared on social media. Daniel and Emily, smiling at a cafe, mugs in hand, their laughter frozen in the perfect picture. Claire's heart sank. She didn't know if it meant anything, and maybe it didn't. But what mattered was that she had waited too long. That night, she wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in years. The words came fast, almost desperate. There are moments that could change everything, and sometimes we lose them because we're too scared to try. Maybe this was one of them. As she closed the journal and turned off the lights, she whispered into the darkness. That was the second time I almost ruined everything. And he still didn't know. Winter came early that year. The city streets shimmered with soft lights, and the office buzzed with the excitement of the holidays. Everyone was talking about their plans, family trips, parties, getaways. Claire, however, planned to spend her Christmas alone, like she had the past few years. She told herself she didn't mind, that peace was better than chaos. But deep down, she wished for something different. Maybe just one evening where she didn't feel like the background character in her own story. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed more cheerful than ever. His friendship with Emily had grown, and Claire noticed it more each day, the way they exchanged inside jokes, the way he looked at her with the same warmth he used to give Claire. Every time she saw it, she felt something break quietly inside her. She told herself it was fine, that she had no right to feel this way. But the truth was harder to ignore. She missed him, more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon, while Claire was sorting through end-of-year reports, Daniel stopped by her desk. "Hey, we're having a small Christmas dinner next week. Just a few of us from work. You should come," she hesitated. The last time she'd turned down an invitation from him, it had haunted her for months. Maybe this time she could make it right. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'll be there." His smile returned, and for a second, everything felt like before. "Good. Wouldn't be the same without you." Those words stayed with her all week. She replayed them in her mind as she picked out a simple red dress for the dinner, as she wrapped the small gift she'd gotten him, a leather notebook with his initials engraved on the cover. It wasn't much, but it meant something to her. She just hoped it wouldn't seem strange. The night of the dinner arrived, and the restaurant glowed with warm lights and soft music. Everyone from the office was there, laughing, chatting, enjoying the break from deadlines and meetings. When Daniel walked in, Claire's heart skipped. He looked effortlessly good in a gray sweater and a gentle smile that reached his eyes. He greeted her first. "You came," he said, his tone almost surprised. "I promised I would," she replied, smiling nervously. The evening flowed easily at first. They talked, shared stories, and even laughed like they used to. But as the night went on, Claire noticed Emily sitting beside Daniel, leaning in a little too close. She tried to ignore it, but the sight of them together made her stomach twist. Daniel seemed unaware of it, or maybe he wasn't, and that hurt even more. When the group exchanged gifts, Claire handed Daniel the notebook quietly. "Just something small," she said. He opened it and smiled. "Claire, this is perfect. Thank you." His voice was warm, sincere, and it should have made her happy. But then Emily handed him her gift, a matching scarf and gloves, and everyone cheered. The two laughed together, and suddenly, Claire felt invisible. The room began to feel smaller. The laughter around her blurred into noise. Without thinking, she stood and excused herself, saying she needed some air. Outside, the winter wind bit at her cheeks, but she barely felt it. She stood by the snow-covered street, her eyes stinging, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she kept doing to herself. That was the third time she almost ruined everything. Not because of what she said, but because of what she couldn't say. Daniel followed her out a few minutes later. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed a break. It's warm in there." He looked at her for a long moment, his breath visible in the cold air. "You've been quiet tonight. You sure everything's fine?" "I'm fine, really," she said quickly, looking away. He didn't believe her. He never did when she said that. "You know, you don't have to keep everything to yourself all the time." Her throat tightened. I'm not great at saying what I feel." He smiled gently. "That's okay. I'm not either." For a few seconds they just stood there, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Claire wanted to tell him everything. That she missed him. That she was scared she'd lost him to someone else. That she'd been her own worst enemy all along. But before she could speak, someone called his name from the door. It was Emily. He glanced back, then looked at Claire again. "Come inside before you freeze," she nodded weakly. "I will. In a minute." He gave her one last smile before heading back in, and the moment slipped away like the others before it. Claire stayed outside, watching the snow fall under the streetlights. She felt foolish, for her silence, for her fear, for letting another chance slip through her fingers. She told herself it was too late now. Maybe Daniel and Emily really were something. Maybe she was meant to stay on the sidelines. Later that night, when everyone said their goodbyes, Daniel hugged her lightly. "Merry Christmas, Claire," he said. "Merry Christmas," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As he walked away, she wanted to call out, to tell him that she cared, that she didn't want to keep pretending everything was fine. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching his back fade into the crowd. That night, she went home and sat by her window again, the snow falling softly outside. She opened her journal and wrote, "Sometimes silence feels safer than truth, but silence also takes away the things we want most." She closed the notebook and leaned her head against the glass, the city lights flickering below. For a moment, she imagined a different version of herself, one brave enough to speak, to take the risk. But that wasn't her. Not yet. As she drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "Thanks for the gift. I really liked it." She smiled faintly, typing a quick reply. "I'm glad." Then she added another message, one she'd wanted to send for a long time. But before hitting send, she froze. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Fear whispered again. What if this ruins everything? She deleted the words, turned off the phone, and whispered into the darkness. "That was the third time I almost ruined everything." And he still didn't know. Outside, the snow kept falling. Quiet, steady, unchanging. Like the way her heart kept waiting for something she wasn't brave enough to claim. Spring arrived quietly that year, soft and uncertain. The snow melted away, and with it, some of Claire's heaviness too. She had spent months trying to move forward, throwing herself into work, trying to focus on herself, telling her heart to forget Daniel. But no matter how much she tried, his presence lingered in everything. The coffee shop they used to visit, the songs they both liked, even the small streets where they once walked after work. All of it carried pieces of him. Daniel had been transferred to another department in March, and Claire barely saw him anymore. Their conversations had become short, polite exchanges in the hallways or over email. He seemed happy, busy, moving ahead. Claire was proud of him, but part of her also felt left behind. It was strange how someone could still feel close even when they were drifting away. One Friday afternoon, while clearing her desk, Claire found the old leather notebook she had given Daniel for Christmas. She had bought one for herself too, hoping they'd both fill them with their thoughts. She opened it and found the first page still blank. She smiled sadly and whispered, "Maybe I should start writing instead of thinking." That weekend, she decided to take a short trip out of the city, a quiet town by the lake. She needed distance, a little time to think without the noise of her routine. The small inn she booked overlooked the water, and for the first time in months, she felt peace. She spent her days walking by the lake, reading and writing in her notebook. On the second evening, as she sat on the pier watching the sunset, her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, Claire?" "It's Daniel." Her heart jumped. "Daniel, how did you—" "Your number's on the old project files," he said, his voice warm but tired. "Listen, I didn't mean to bother you. I just heard you took some time off. I wanted to check in." She smiled softly. "I'm fine. Just needed a break." There was a pause. Then he said, "I've been meaning to talk to you for a while." Something in his tone made her heart race. "What about?" he sighed. "I don't want to do this over the phone. Can I come see you?" Before she could think, she said yes. The next morning, Daniel showed up at the inn, looking both nervous and relieved. He wasn't the same man she remembered. There was something calmer, more thoughtful about him. They sat outside near the lake, the breeze carrying the faint scent of spring. "You look good," he said quietly. "So do you," she replied, smiling faintly. He laughed. "I doubt it. Work's been crazy, but I missed this, talking to you." Her heart ached at his words. "You could have called," she said gently. "I know," he admitted, "but I didn't know if you wanted me to." There was silence for a moment. Then she said, "Daniel, why are you here?" He took a deep breath. "Because I realized something. I've been thinking about us, the way we used to be. I know things changed, but I can't stop feeling like I did something wrong." Claire blinked, confused. "Wrong?" he nodded. "After that Christmas dinner, I thought maybe you didn't want me around. You kept pulling away, and I didn't want to make things uncomfortable, so I stayed quiet. But I should have asked. I should have tried to understand. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't your fault. It was mine. I kept pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I thought if I said how I felt, I'd lose you. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. How you felt? She hesitated, then exhaled shakily. I cared about you, Daniel. More than I should have. But you had Emily, and you seemed happy. I didn't want to ruin that. He frowned softly. Emily and I, we were never together, Claire. She's dating someone else now. The words hit her like a rush of wind. What? But I thought, I know, he said quietly. It must have looked that way. But it was never her. It was always you. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The world seemed to blur, the sound of the lake, the rustling of leaves, everything fading into the background. Then why didn't you say something? She whispered. Because I thought you didn't feel the same. Every time I tried, you stepped back. So I convinced myself I imagined it. Claire closed her eyes, the memories flooding back, the missed chances, the silence, the way she had walked away every time her heart wanted to stay. We really were terrible at timing, weren't we? Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe we just needed time to realize what mattered. They sat there for a long while, saying nothing. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the lake in gold and pink. It felt like the moment they had both been waiting for, the one that had been years in the making. Finally, Claire turned to him. I almost ruined everything 5 times, she said softly. The first time was when I ignored what I felt. The second was when I let my fear make me push you away. The third was when I walked out that night. The fourth was when I convinced myself I didn't matter. And the fifth, Daniel tilted his head. The fifth? She smiled, her eyes glistening. The fifth would have been not telling you this right now. He chuckled quietly, then reached out, gently covering her hand with his. Then let's not ruin it anymore. The air between them was calm, filled with quiet understanding. They didn't rush to define anything. They didn't need grand declarations. It was enough that, for the first time, both of them had finally said what they'd held in for so long. When they returned to the inn, Daniel walked her to her door. The stars shimmered above, and the night was still. So, he said softly, what happens now? Claire smiled. We start over. No missed chances this time. He nodded, smiling in return. I'd like that. As he turned to leave, she called out, Daniel? He stopped and looked back. Thank you, she said, for not giving up when I almost did. He smiled one last time before walking down the quiet path toward his car. She watched him go, her heart lighter than it had been in years. That night, Claire opened her notebook again. On the first page, she wrote, Sometimes love doesn't come in perfect moments. It comes in mistakes, in silence, in second chances. And if you're lucky, it waits for you, even when you think you've lost it. She smiled as she closed the book. For the first time, she didn't feel regret. She felt peace. And somewhere in that quiet lakeside town, she finally realized that love wasn't about getting everything right. It was about finding someone who stayed, even when you almost ruined everything.